The Bible is a book like no other. It is one book made up of 66 smaller books that all work together to tell one story, God's story. In this podcast, theologian Kim Burgess helps listeners make sense of that story and to read the Bible the way it was intended. This is Covenant Hermeneutics and Biblical Eschatology. Gary, we just finished, or we just ran 2 episodes of. There were 2 individual interviews that you did with Kim Burgess, but they were essentially designed to be 20-minute podcasts, and basically just an introduction to who is Kim Burgess, who is why you've been talking about him for years on the podcast, and we finally were able to get him and his voice on the podcast, and they were very well received. So I'm getting a lot of feedback from people who said this is great. Can we get more?
Yeah, we don't want to have these. This is really he's really giving us a class in biblical theology and hermeneutics, which is the science of interpretation, and I didn't want to take up what we do in terms of this podcast, Which are kind of contemporary issues of what's going on in the world and all that. With that, so we haven't decided if we're just going to set up a separate place on AmericanVision.org where you'll be able to listen to these, or do it some other way. But we are going to continue this. I've been in communication with Kim by phone and email and text messaging on the approach we're going to take with this.
Yeah, I didn't realize you mentioned that in the I think it was in the first interview with him that he actually worked here at American Vision for a while.
Yeah, he did. He moved to the Atlanta area. We were at Reformed Theological Seminary together. It's interesting. He was describing to me his kind of pilgrimage in all this. Is that his interest is in biblical theology, and people say, "Well, everybody's biblical theology." It's a discipline within the study of theology, where you're looking at the Bible as an organic whole. There are pieces, he calls them facets, that all work together. Yeah. It's the one and the many. You can't understand something unless you understand its parts and then the wholeness of those parts and how they all work together.
It's the totality of the biblical narrative,
right? Of
the biblical story.
And he used the example of the human body. And this is why one of the reasons why the evolution cannot work. Because it does not understand and ignores the concept of the one and the many. There's one body, but there are many parts, and those things aren't working all at the same time and working well. The body, the whole, doesn't work.
One system doesn't evolve, and then another one, and then another one.
Right, and anybody who's just stubbed a toe can tell you, that little thing can affect your whole body, and yet the toe doesn't work unless you have, unless you have the whole body. And of course, the Bible uses that as well. We're one body, many parts, and they all work together. Right. Well, the Bible works that way too, but traditionally, when you become a Christian, you learn a whole list of particular doctrines and specific scripture passages that go to support those doctrines. Right. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's an incomplete approach to Scripture. And
you need both, but you have to have a biblical theology in order. Systematic theology is kind of like house rules. These are how we define our terms here inside our Christian world. This is what it means to be man. This is what it means to be created in God's image. All those things that the systematic theology deals with are really, really helpful. But you need the whole story to understand how all those pieces fit together within there.
Exactly, because you don't want the Bible to be like Aesop's fables.
Yeah.
There are lots of great principles in Aesop's fables, but it's an incomplete way of looking at the world, where the Bible is history written in as historical time and space, and there is
and to a certain group of people at a certain time.
Continuity to it all, all of those factors. And Kim has been working on this for 40 some years. I mean, he sent me material back in 1999 with this thing all mapped out. And so this would be more what came out of this was prophecy was the area in which, because there's so much controversy, especially with me on Facebook right now, because I'm asking all these questions about things, and your hermeneutical model is going to determine how you approach certain texts. And there are guys out there, wait a minute, you got the Westminster Confession of Faith, they've settled this all for us. And so, this is, people do this to me all the time. They'll start quoting from the Westminster Confession of Faith, and I said, don't quote the Westminster Confession of Faith to me. There are millions and millions and millions and millions of Christians out there who have never even heard of the Westminster Confession of Faith. You better make a solid biblical argument. And they'll say, well, that solid biblical argument has already been made.
Okay.
And I say, well, maybe that's the case. But if you go back to the Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 1, section 10, it tells you, and it's the people who put the Westminster Confession of Faith together, all 33 chapters or sections, they'll tell you this isn't the final rule here.
Yeah. This is the beginning.
Yeah, is mistakes can be made.
Right.
And if you know anything about the
writers themselves were less bold than people today to say, "Oh, they got it all right."
Yeah.
Even the writers themselves said, "We didn't get it all right." This is a good place to begin.
Yeah, because one of the Westminster Confession of Faith, about 1647, put together by some of the finest scholars in the world at that time. I mean, I'm not denying that at all. But they had a section in there on the Antichrist, which they took the Antichrist passages and said that refers to the papacy.
Right. Products of their culture.
Yeah.
And that's what was going on at the time.
It was. And if you look at almost every reformer, they took that position. And that's why a lot of people today who adhere to the Westminster Confession of Faith maintain that when the Bible talks about the man of lawlessness or the Antichrist or the beast and so forth, it's talking about the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Why? Is because that's what the Westminster Confession of Faith stated. Well, the American version of the Westminster Confession of Faith, they took that out. They still say, hey, the Pope is not, the vicar of the church or anything like that. They made that very clear that the Pope is not at all to be deemed salvific in any way. But they were wrong,
mm-hmm.
and they admitted it.
Yeah.
A lot of people still don't want to admit that. And there are places in there when you deal with eschatology in the Westminster Confession of Faith, where we talk about the second coming, that they use Matthew chapter 24, verse 30. Well, anybody who's done any work in this area knows Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 refers events leading up to and including the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. It's not a second coming passage. So what we're going to do is to kind of the look at the Bible in terms of its hermeneutical model. How do you approach the Bible in its wholeness to get to some of these difficult passages, which in many cases I think were misapplied, misinterpreted by scholars for centuries.
Okay.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. You could come out on the other end of this by saying they were absolutely right, but they got there the wrong way, or they got there the roundabout way,
right?
And if you look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, we don't. Darren Doane used this analogy about math, and I remember this when I was in school. Everybody remembers this in school. What did your math teacher, as you moved up the math scale from addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and as math became more complicated, what did your math teacher always tell you to do when you had a test? Show your work.
Yeah.
And it does two things. It shows that you knew what you were doing and you weren't cheating on someone. And the second thing is, if you got the wrong answer, and if you show your work, you can find within the work that you're showing where you made a mistake and fix it.
And it breaks down a bigger problem into smaller ones. Yeah. So you work your way through it from the simple to the complex.
And that was one of the things the point that Kim made. He says that it starts off complicated.
Right. People want to begin with simplicity. Yeah.
We're at church. We've been Sunday evenings. We've had Christmas music and so forth. And there's a young girl in our church. if you heard this young girl play the violin, you would think this is an adult.
Okay.
And if I pick 25 people and say, pick the person who you just heard play this violin, you'd never pick her.
Okay.
She's like 9 or 10 years old.
Wow.
And it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just remarkable to listen to her play. Well, it's simple for her now because of all the work that she did to get to that particular point.
Yeah.
But too often we Christians, we become Christians. Our hearts are changed, our minds are changed, our behaviors are changed, and then we start studying theology. And oftentimes it's read this book, study the catechism, and so forth and so on. And we never learned the process of doing really good biblical theology.
Well, it's all about Jesus, Gary, which if you read Luke 24, though, Jesus says all the scriptures refer to him. So now you're back to the one and the many, you're back to the complexity. You know, it is simply all about Jesus. But what does that mean?
Yeah. When people say that, you know, it's just about the gospel.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Right.
You got to know something about creation. You need to know something about the fall. The idea of grace, works. I mean, all that stuff all goes together.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Francis Schaeffer used this phrase about we tend to see things in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be more a course in hermeneutics that will be reflective of eschatology.
Okay.
Because
it fits into the story because it's part of the story. It isn't the story altogether.
Oh
though.
yeah, I mean I remember sitting down with a group of people at a table, and he says I don't think I'm a preterist, and I'm not asking what kind of preterist someone was, and I said, well I said you are a preterist.
Yeah.
He said, what do you mean I am? I said, are you a Christian? He said, well, yeah, then you're a preterist.
Exactly.
He said, what do you mean by that? I said, do you believe the Old Testament where was it Micah 5:2, where the Messiah would be born?
Born in Bethlehem, yeah.
And how about Psalm 22? And you know, some have said there are almost 300 prophecies or types in the Old Testament referring to the coming of Jesus, his death, every aspect of his life. And he said, well, yeah, I believe all those. Do you believe those things have been fulfilled already? And he said, well, yeah. I said, you're a preterist,
right?
Because you've looked at all of these things, and now they were prophetic when they were made, but now they're in their past.
They were fulfilled in the person and work of Christ.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, and people get so bent out of shape over this when you start tinkering with something that they've believed and held on to. And it's like what's that game? Is it Jenga?
Yeah.
Yeah, with
the blocks.
The blocks.
Yeah.
They're afraid if you pull out one of those blocks,
the whole
thing's
going
to come down.
Yep.
And this this happens when I talk to people about eschatology, and they're dispensationalists and so forth. And when I'm going over this stuff, I remember some guy I was on some Florida radio station. And this was some time ago. I did an interview on there, and this guy called in and just tore me apart, blasted me. I cannot, this heresy, all this sort of thing, and so forth and so on. I said, look, I'm just making a case here. Well, I remember getting a letter from him. Oh, it must have been like 6 months later, and he said, I have to apologize. He said, I went back and I checked these things out for myself, and I think you're right.
Oh, we need to get back on the radio program and have you tell me that over the air, because that's the way you took me apart initially.
Well, I think the guy who interviewed me ended up getting convicted of murder. I think he killed his wife or something. Oh yeah. Anyway, that's another story.
It really is one.
But it's threatening. I mean, I became a Christian. I was raised Roman Catholic. You go from Roman Catholicism to any form of Protestantism, and it's a huge leap.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the groundwork has already been laid because in the Roman Catholic Church, we learned to say the Apostles' Creed. And so you get that Lord's Prayer. It used to be called just, your Roman Catholic is the Our Father. The Protestants add a tagline at the end. When I went to public school, we said the Lord's Prayer, and it's, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. That's added to the Protestant prayer as opposed to a Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And all kinds of things change as a result of that. And that's threatening.
Yeah.
That really is threatening.
Right.
It could be family relationships and, where you work, where you go to, if you teach somewhere and so forth. So I understand there's a threat to your existing system.
But if you've built your system on a falsehood, you should want to be able to test that, and if it needs to come down, it needs to come down.
Yeah, and one of the points I'm making with all of this is I'm looking for consistency. I'm looking for consistency in various passages.
Describe what you mean there by consistency.
Well, for example, and I'm not picking on Ken Gentry right now, but the consistency would be the Westminster Confession of Faith, larger catechism, question number 56, uses Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 as a second coming passage.
Okay.
Jesus will come on the clouds of heaven and so forth and so on. And he says it again in Matthew 26:64 when he's speaking to Caiaphas and those who are around him. You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great and glory. And so the larger catechism, question 56, says that refers to the second coming.
Okay.
Well, Ken Gentry and I, and anybody else who's a preterist on Matthew 24, at least up through verse 34, says, no, that's dealing with events of the first century.
Right.
Then you get to Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, where it talks about...
So just pointing out there, though, that and of course we don't say this lightly, but that's where you would take an issue with the creed. Or
the confession,
or with the catechism anyway.
Yeah. And the thing is with say the Nicene Creed, as far as I know, they've never attached any scripture passages to these.
Okay.
They never showed their work, in essence.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that. I've been trying to find out, were there notes taken? Was there anything? Do we have anything? I don't know. I looked at Schaff's three volumes on the creeds. And I couldn't find anything. So I'm not completely sure, but I want to see their work.
Yeah, and this isn't rare. I mean, I'm an inactive PCA ruling elder, but when I became a ruling elder, they asked you, do you accept the Westminster Standards? Do you take any exceptions to the Westminster Confession? And just about everybody did have some sort of exception to the confession's definition and how the Sabbath works out. So everybody would kind of say, like, I'm not as dogmatic, I guess, on what you can and can't do on the Sabbath, and typically any PCA session would say, well, yeah, okay, that's
or even
that's
or even if the first day of the week is the Sabbath.
Right.
I mean, that's a question in and of itself. Yeah. That wait a minute, are you saying that the Sunday is not the Sabbath? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's something that people have, in fact, have debated as to whether it's the Lord's Day and so forth and so on. Do all the Sabbath regulate? If you ask those kinds of questions, that doesn't make you unorthodox in terms of your belief system.
What I'm saying is there is at least a general agreement on some things. We're like, oh yeah, well that's fine. We can take exceptions to that. But as soon as you start asking questions apparently about other things, then it becomes a debatable thing.
So, Revelation 1:7, if you pick up a typical commentary in Revelation 1:7, you'll find that, that every eye will see him, et cetera. They'll say that's referring to the second coming.
Okay.
But, Ken Gentry and others say, no, that's not the second coming. That is, in fact, the judgment coming of Jesus in AD 70.
Okay.
It's linked with Matthew 20, chapter 24, and so it's this consistency. If you were to recite the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, you could find a single verse that ends the discussion. God's the creator of heaven and earth.
Okay.
Well, that's a simple one.
Yeah.
Born of the Virgin Mary. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Suffered under Pontius Pilate. Crucified,
Right.
died, and buried. There is a single verse for every one of those. Jesus is, the Nicene Creed doesn't say Jesus is God in that way. But if you wanted to find a passage that says that Jesus is in fact God incarnate, you go, well, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Right.
Simple.
Right.
But when you get to the eschatology stuff, some passages, I can see where that's AD 70, and I can see, well, these might be Second Coming passages, but maybe those are debatable.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Eschatology is something that has not been really formulated. But most say, well, wait a minute. That Jesus is coming again at the end of history, and he's going to wrap everything up. Everybody knows that's true. Okay, everybody knows that's true, but I want to see the work.
Right.
Show me your work
Right.
on. I want to see what arguments you're using, or the idea that when you die, you're going to go, your spirit or soul goes to heaven, and you'll be in that condition, whatever that is, until the end, until God raises your body up out of the dust of the ground and merges the two together. That's fundamental to the Christian faith. But I want to see the work. I want to see the work on it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're just going to deal with hermeneutics. And it's not all going to be about eschatology. It's going to be about understanding the Bible in its whole and in its pieces as well.
Okay, so be on the lookout for those. Like Gary said, we haven't really determined how we're going to present these lectures, these teachings. I don't know whatever we want to call them going forward. Maybe a few podcasts will be forthcoming. Maybe there will be a longer form. But we're still in talks with Kim about that, and this has been something we've been wanting to do for a while. So we're glad that there's interest, and it's a fascinating study, and like Gary said, it's something that really hasn't been done before. It needs to be put out there, so then people can say, well, is it biblical? Then they can, just like the Bereans, they listened to all the things that Paul said and said, well, where do you find this in the Bible, Paul? Where do you find this in the Bible?
Right.
According
and
to the Scriptures.
Look, people will tell you they found all this in the Bible.
Yeah.
And again, I understand that. I understand what the arguments are.
Right.
I really do. And someone, I've been commanded to answer these three questions.
Yeah.
And I want to say, well, after I answer these three questions, what are the next three questions I'm going to have to ask? Are they asking them of everybody?
Yeah.
But anyway, the third question deals with, do you believe that essentially a time is going to come where the judgment comes and everything is going to be made new and all evil is going to be eradicated from the universe?
Yeah.
And do you affirm that or do you deny it? That's basically the question.
Okay.
And so here was my question. Well, that all sounds good, but what do you do about hell?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at chapter 33, section 2 of the Westminster Confession of Faith, it talks about eternal torment.
Yeah.
So that means that the wicked are in hell forever.
Right.
Forever. So if you ask the question about, do you believe that evil will be done away with in the universe? Well, what if there's still hell?
Yeah.
And someone wrote, not to be named, said, well, it's a different dimensional thing. Well, then the question isn't clear enough. It needs to be reworded.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things I'm stubborn about, wanting to know how things work.
Okay.
And I want to know, I like consistency. And some guy said, well, what's the phrase? Consistency of hobgoblins of little minds or something. And I
What?
said, yeah, you ever heard that?
No.
Consistency is the hobgoblins of of little minds. And I said, is there a Bible verse for that? We shouldn't be thinking about consistency on things. I mean, it's
and do you want that in any other aspect of your life?
Yeah.
Do you want inconsistency when you get in a car?
Yeah.
Do you want people to drive on whatever road they want? I mean, it's just
I know
we
if
don't
you
live our lives that way.
You had a contract. And you had inconsistencies in the contract.
That's not what I meant.
We worry about that one. It's anyway. So this it should be fun. I think we'll have a lot of good time with it.
All right, so that's kind of a wrap up to the 2 interviews that we did with Kim Burgess, and like I said, more to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you have questions or comments about what you hear on this podcast, please send them to podcast@americanvision.org. That's podcast@americanvision.org. And until next time, keep reading and studying your Bible.